We're going to discuss the topics that matter to you: race, single parenting, domestic violence, education, and now, the Hagir Show.
Hello and welcome to the Hagir Show. I am your host, Hagir. We are here at this lovely, beautiful house with Miss Sara Bunn, and I will let her introduce herself. Can you please introduce yourself to the audience and tell us who you are and what you do?
Hi, Hagir. Thanks. First, I want to thank you for coming and welcome to my home. I am going to be turning this house into a studio gallery workshop this summer. I'm really looking forward to doing that. And I've just become a nonprofit, so I don't really remember my mission statement off the top of my head, but I'd like to read it to you because that might help explain exactly who I am and what I do.
Sounds good.
Bun Fun Works is a fashion and art history nonprofit whose goal is to increase awareness of unsung people of color and events that are not usually found in history books. Bun Fun Works addresses that void by creating period fashions from cultural textiles and presenting them together with photographs to engage the audience in a visual dialogue about the everyday professional person of color's contribution to the birth and expansion of the United States. We will strive to break down barriers to diversity by providing exhibits, workshops, and books that will empower and inspire people around the globe through fashion and the arts, while elevating discussions about the prominent history of people of color from emancipation through to the present. Basically, what I do is I tell stories with textiles.
When you said, let's put this in simple terms so everyone out there can understand what you basically do. When you say the unsung stories or our history, what do you exactly mean by that?
If we would look at the recent movie called Hidden Figures, who knew about these women? Hardly anyone.
Mm-hmm.
These are unsung heroes. And we have them in neighborhoods. We have people who have created communities that no one knew about. We have people who lived in Central Park from 82nd to 89th Street. Nobody knows who they are. They've been mentioned, but they're not spoken about. We have history books where we are showing children, all children, people of color, beginning with 1600s, where we are beaten, torn, our families are disrupted, we're enslaved, and then we're given emancipation, and there's a blank in history. They don't talk about us anymore until the Roaring '20s. I said to myself one day, there's a void. Where are these people? What happened? How did we come from here to there? And I actually found them. These are unsung heroes. These are people who were pioneers. These are people of color who purchased land that it was unheard of in New York. Not even white women could own land. But here we had a community of people who bought land and had schools, and we had churches, and there were farms, and nobody who knows. It's a very small, tiny little, in Central Park there's a small little plaque. It has been discovered, but we don't talk about it. And it's important because these images that we could be sharing with the children would fill that void and have our children not just see us in this negative light, and then we jump to being athletes and professionals. Athletes and singers and dancers. We were doctors and lawyers and teachers and educators and activists and abolitionists. We were all those things, and they hardly ever have those images for our children to see. So I think that bringing the stories back up, using textiles to bring them to life, using fashion to get their eye, because kids love fashion.
Mm-hmm.
Once you can catch their attention, you can teach them a lesson.
And the funny thing is, I think I met you almost 3 years ago when my girls had the honor to come to your house and be a part of your project. at that moment, what you're doing caught my eye because you took the time, and I think I say that to everyone that I met when I mention your name. I say, you took the time to explain.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot from you and my kids, and I'm sure a lot of other kids did learn a lot because you took the time to not just say, here is a beautiful dress
Right.
you're going to wear,
Right.
but the history behind
The
that.
history behind the dress, the history behind the textile, I mean, to weave these cloths, to design them, to paint them, this was all an expression of people who never got to express themselves in any other way.
And a lot of the people that, or the stories that you brought to light, some of them I never heard of. So, I mean, this is a very important thing to do. And I agree with you, there's a huge part of our history that no one know about.
And or people might have felt uncomfortable telling. Some of the stories that I'm going to attempt to depict through textile and fashion, they are American horror stories. No, slavery was a horror. Emancipation sounds great. Emancipation was a horror. It was a lie.
Can you elaborate?
You can say that we're emancipated, but you treat us still like property. And we really don't have equal share. You're just talking. It's pretty much like right now. So a lot of these stories where people bought land, they owned it, and then it was taken away by eminent domain. I mean, there was gentrification. This is all going on right now. There's a lot to be learned from what happened before because it's simply repeating itself. And what we need to do is stop the perpetuation of that. If we know that we rent homes or we rent our boutiques where we do our business from, we can be put out. If you own your land or you own the building, you have a whole lot, more chance of holding on to your property regardless of gentrification comes by your way. There are some stores in Harlem right now hanging on by a thread, but because they have purchased their building, they're able to at least have some kind of legal footing and not be pushed out. All these other little stores gone.
Okay. So some of the stories that you shared, would you like to share some of? I know the Seneca.
Well, there's Seneca, there's Weeksville, and I'd be glad to take you on a little tour to show you how I set it up in the house so that when people come in, I can actually explain the story and you walk away feeling a whole lot better about your ancestors and knowing that they did contribute, they were here, and they were beautiful.
That's amazing. And now we will have you, Miss Sara, take us on a trip in our history, and starting with the Seneca Village story.
Thank you. This story is about 4 principal people who purchased lands in 1827. The first gentleman to have done that is this gentleman right here with the shoe shine box. He saved 5 cents a shoe shine to collect $125 to purchase his first parcel of land between 82nd and 89th Street in what we now know as Central Park West. So after he purchased this land, there was a mother and daughter team who came together and they purchased land from Mr. Whitehall. I remember the farmer's name, I believe, was Whitehall or Whitehead. And he had a big plot of land. They wanted to get rid of it. And they didn't care who they sold it to, which is really ironic because women were not allowed to own land at all. But here we had these women and this gentleman, all emancipated and or free people of color who owned land in 1827. This woman apparently has had a hard life at one point, having been enslaved, but now emancipated. Half of her is in slavery, half of her is free. Her daughter, as you can tell by the hue, her skin, one of the reasons why she carries this musket is to protect this child from any of the horrors that she had gone through. So it was kind of difficult. They were coming through a lot, but they made their way. They bought land together and they built their home, had their farms, and I believe one of them was a teacher. This woman here is called the Deaconess. She carries the keys and the book of deeds. The book of deeds is something that it lists all the people who own land, how much land, how much they paid for it, to make sure that they had their own records of what land was owed to them and what was theirs. And from 1827 to about 1830s, everything was great. The town was flourishing. They had schools, they had farmland, they had a church. And then the city decided, New York City decided that they needed a park. They needed something. It was really a lot more political, and we won't go into that. But it was a matter of, London has a great bridge. What does the city have? Oh, we don't have anything as fancy. Well, it became like architectural rivalry. And now all of a sudden, let's build a really big space. We'll call it Central Park, and you have to kick these people out. Eminent domain is what they used. And so by 1858, everyone was kicked off the land. And these people were never again to. There's no DNA. I find that odd. It also leads me to believe maybe they were killed off. I don't know. But they fought for 2 years to keep their land. And now our shoeshine man, he tried to hold out as long as he could, fighting the system, going back and forth to court. And finally, he just gave in. And they came in and booted everyone out. Eminent domain and Seneca Village was no longer. At night, however, a different story with our people in Seneca. They're professionals by day, but at night they became abolitionists, risking their lives, trying to help other abolitionists free slaves along the way. They could not be found out. Everything was done undercover, quietly, or they too would have been killed. Now, on this side, we have another community, a person of self-sufficient African-American community that most people may not know about. There's talk about it, but we don't talk about it enough. This one was located not in Manhattan, but in Brooklyn, in what's now known as Bedford-Stuy. This woman, she does not have a name. She is only known as the Weeksville Lady. The Weeksville Lady. Okay. Weeksville of Brooklyn. Believe it was 1830s. A gentleman by the name of Weeks, Mr. Weeks started this community of self-sufficient. Again, they had their own houses, their own churches, their own schools. Again, all of this was done to get away from downtown by the docks, where there was filth, there was water, the Four Corners. We know that. You remember that movie, Gangland? I mean, it was really notoriously violent against our people. Emancipation meant nothing. Just because you said we were free, they were still hanging people, beating people up. And to get away from all of that, to just be able to breathe, live, and have a decent life, this is the reason that they went off to their own communities. Even some areas, swamplands, where it was horrible. Once you had to go through all this muck and mire, but once you could get into a clearing, this is where they would live, all to get away from the violence, the racial violence. So, albeit emancipated, it was not an easy life. And I chose to represent this young woman because of her stoicness. Not knowing her name really didn't mean anything to me. She still exemplified the dignity of people of color at that time.
And you presented this very beautifully. I mean, even your models who you chose, they did show some, strengths.
And actually authenticity in culture, because this young lady is African. Her parents are African from Ghana. And they live in Brooklyn. It was so authentic that we could shoot this with a young lady of the actual, generational, ancestral connection, using also the textiles that were hand done from African textiles. Mud cloth is on the bottom of her skirt. The velvet trims that they may have used, the the jacket exemplifying the fact that there was a war, you know, and how the style of the war clothing and the jackets actually you could see in their fashion of the day. The sash is what these soldiers would wear across when they were coming down the streets of the city. So this all bits and pieces that I found. I repurposed things in the house. I used 2 different hats to create the height that I saw in the image of her in a tintype. And this is where I found this image. It was on
So
the
there are
website.
actually images
There
of
was an image
what
of
you
her.
have
There
created.
of this young lady, there was an image because there was a camera after the 20s. But 1827, Seneca Village, there was no cameras. So there's no photos of these people, but their names are in a census. So there's proof that they existed. With her, there's no name, but there's a photo.
There's a photo. How ironic.
Yeah. So we have to get all the pieces, put them together, try to make people aware that we didn't stop at slavery and then begin dancing on stage. We pulled ourselves, we educated ourselves, we wore more than shackles. And that's the tagline for the series.
You're an amazing woman.
Oh, thanks for having me.
All right. So this is the story about Seneca Village
And Weeksville.
and Weeksville.
I will be moving on to do the next story will be about 1910, moving forward to the stories about Black Wall Street and how they burnt down Black Wall Street. I think people are unaware that there were 3 different Black Wall Streets. There were 3 different towns that this happened in, and not every place got burned down. The North Carolina Insurance Company started their business in North Carolina, and that was considered Black Wall Street for them, and they grew, and they survived, and they thrived. I kind of want to continue to perpetuate the positive story. We know all about the
negative
and all the
and
all that. We don't want that. We want to show our children that that wasn't the only part of the story. That we did indeed own. We raised up. We had our own communities. We had our own professions, and that we did well.
And truly, this is what important, because everything that our kids, their lack of confidence, their lack of self-esteem could be related to just not knowing that there is good
and
came
not
out.
seeing the images of people like this.
And that's
Seeing
why
them
the
clothed.
hero, which one of my favorite work of yours too. I mean, they're all are my favorite, honestly. But the hero line, which, I mean, we're just going to mention that you had put some really empowering people onto the dresses
I can take
to
you
show,
see.
and to show that, we are more than shackles, like what you said. And this is your line, but I'm using it, I'm borrowing it.
Yeah.
We are more than shackles. We are pioneer, we're business people, we're strong. We survived,
Survived it, and we should be recognized.
and we did not
children
just
should know.
survive. We strived, and we became something.
But if you want to see the Bun Fun collection with the Who's Your Hero line, I can show you that.
We can do that also
Whenever you're
at some
ready.
point. But what you said, your next story, the 1960.
What would be 1910 and the North Carolina Insurance Company. I would like to bring that forth just to show that going back to that idea of us owning our own institution. Us not relying on going to someone else's bank. Relying upon us going to someone to buy something from someone else. Let's get our own institution.
Okay.
And I think that will help us.
Okay.
So Hagir, now that you've kind of seen one segment of what I do, which is the nonprofit side of my business, this is the side that I use to educate. I also have another side because people love what I do and they want it and can I have one, but they have to be custom. And each one has to have its own meaning, and it's not just anything you're going to find on a rack. So those types of clothing, they're upstairs. You want me to show?
Definitely. Let's go upstairs then. And before we go upstairs, as you can see, this whole house is a piece of art or history. And this is where
Did you want me to turn
the magic... No, it's good.
Okay.
All right. So talk to us.
Up in this room is kind of where I store pieces until someone has a request for them, or maybe someone wants to do a fashion show, or a teacher may want to surprise their students. I mean, there's so many ways that we can use these pieces. But I'm going to tell you, every time they go out, they make an impact on the girls, especially the girls. The whimsy of these particular dresses, the crinolines, the lace, the vintage, they're curious. And once we can get their attention, that's when we can start discussing what's actually on the dresses.
Everybody loves fashion, and you're
Everybody
using
loves
it
fashion.
in a positive way.
Little kids, even the old, everyone loves fashion. And that's along with music and art, it is one of the best unifiers. So as I decided that I was watching fashion, I was watching what the girls were wearing out here, I was seeing what a lot of negative things going on. I also noticed that there was a lot of attention paid to certain iconic pinup women of America. A lot of them looked like this, but I didn't see any of us. And I'm not knocking Marilyn Monroe. She was an activist quietly in her own right. She too was fighting the system and was seen as a misfit. And the second, walk behind me, Marilyn, that she wasn't bright. She was highly intelligent. But women were always thought of, especially at this period, as not having any brains at all. I didn't want that to be our pinup girl. I wanted to find someone who was going to represent us. And then I was like, what one? There's many. So I developed this line called, Who's Your Hero? And for every iconic image that we might have of someone like Marilyn, I wanted to bring forth an image of someone like Josephine Baker. And when we talk about Josephine Baker, the one way that I tell stories through fabric is by using the fabric to show their personality or what maybe may have gone on in their life. One thing we know about Josephine, she was ridiculed here in the States. They really made a lot of fun of her, treated her like she was, let her go up to all kinds of just negativity. Europe loved her. France, she went to Paris, loved her. And I found that they treated her like a clown here. And I found the fabric that is normally used for clown suits, right, to show that, to identify with that. However, once she left here, I feel she kind of went from broke to baroque. And I used this type of pattern to show once she left here that she really found more beauty. People really appreciated her outside of her own country. And I thought that was pretty sad that she had to do that and go that far. But the fact that they treated her like a gesture was one of the reasons I used this fabric. And to show that again and how we use the textile to tell the story, we have another heroine that we don't see Dorothy Dandridge on T-shirts as much as we see Marilyn Monroe, but we should. She too, in her own right, did not want to be the character that they continued to put her in. She was typecast as a hussy, as a floozy, and she really didn't want that. She liked to Marilyn Monroe and a lot of the other girls, Lena Horne. They wanted roles of substance. But you're just our exotic. So to even get your foot into the door was amazing. And I guess they just had to put up with a whole lot of nonsense. But because she was typecast and stuck into this Carmen role forever, so to speak, I happened to find a textile that discusses what a floozy might say to another guy, maybe to two guys, because she's playing them. And I said, the little wording on this skirt is perfect to describe the character and caricature that they always had Dorothy in. I want Dorothy to be remembered for her brilliance, and not that she was a floozy. But the way to tell the story, if you read these, you'll get what I'm saying. It says, "Dear John, I'm staying in the city after all. I'll miss you." And some of these other little stories, she had been pulling John along. "Oh, I'll meet you here, I'll meet you there." Finally, in the end, she left John for another guy.
Okay.
But just the fact that the fabric kind of tells the story, it works. And once you can get a young lady to sit down, if she's going to model for you, no one who models for us can model unless they research their hero.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot walk in the dress. You can't shoot the dress. You can't talk about the dress. You can't have the dress unless you know who the person is that you're wearing, or you're not truly representing. So that's another way. And if there's 17 dresses, I do a show, there's 17 brand new girls that are going to learn something. Something about textiles, something about a heroine, and something about history. We can also branch off with a few that may not be so much about the heroine itself. Let's say, as in this case, don't forget too, we go from the era and the period that they're in, that's the style of the dress. So if in the 1940s it would be slimmer, 1950s it's going to be really big. The girls ask why? Why such big skirts? 1950s, well, the war was over. But when the war is going on, you have to conserve. "Oh, that's why the skirts were skinny, Miss Sarah." Yes. And they get it. And they start to see that there's something else besides fashion just being fashion. There's a reason sometimes why things happen and why people wore what they wore. Also, in homage to not just women, but the movement itself, this dress was created to honor Gordon Parks, who was a photographer who actually dedicated his whole life to taking images of our people, ancestors way back, all over the country, and he made sure to document us in everyday life. It's really important because who else was doing it? When you think about it, not many. So we have Van der Zee, who takes the photos of the luxurious, wealthy, but we also have Gordon Parks, who made sure to document all of us, not just those that were wealthy, but the people that may have migrated here and became domestics, and the men who the only jobs they really could get at that time were the porter jobs, the Pullman portman on the trains. The reason why I chose these textiles was to indicate the struggle, the fact that these black and white stripes really are to talk about the stripes on the backs of the people that were whipped and beaten to just even get to this point, to then be emancipated and then migrate and then come here and then have these kinds of jobs. I mean, we went from stripes and to stars. We really are amazing. And so I want our kids and our people to know that we may have come from the stripes, but we really are really fabulous people. This is all to empower, to make you feel better. You can't tell me that when a girl comes in here and she doesn't, and she understands this, she hears this. Now she's going to walk the runway in this dress. Her whole demeanor changes, and she knows and she understands. So you have the lesson, you have the dress, you have the joy, but it's all combined. It's the perfect way to teach. It's not like you have to sit here and learn this, open this book. No, it's more like hands-on, a feeling. Art is to be shared, and it works if you combine all these elements. You can really get a child's attention, and the lesson will stick. And I think that's the point, that they walk away with something that they'll never forget.
And that's what's amazing about everything you do. It should be added to the curriculums in the school.
I hope so.
Yeah. It will. All right. And let's go down the stairs and talk about other.
Now this is the next piece that I'm working on, which is probably going to go into the educational portion.
Okay.
That will go into the nonprofit, and it will be used in exhibits and to teach. This one will not be sold.
Okay.
The idea of this dress, ironically, how I would use this crinoline, and it's so feminine, and all the things that a vulture out here would go for. But when I was thinking about this topic that you introduced me to that really touched my heart, which was human trafficking, the stories
Sexual
of the
assault.
Sudan. For when we met, you told me that, and I wrote that down, and I researched it, and I kept it to my heart. The sexual assault, the domestic violence, the abduction of our children, and then being sold into markets, being sold for slave labor. It really brought it home to me that this has probably been happening, but I'd like to somehow, because I do these dresses and I have attached some kind of a message to it, I thought I'd create one in honor of this topic and in honor of the women and the people who help these children once we get them back. You know, thank you for the work that you do. And in creating this piece, I first, of course, again, had to go to the textile. I needed a textile to tell the story that I'm trying to express. And I found it's a piece of toile, which is a fabric that I noticed had very Parisian looking, like pastoral scenes, usually in blue and white. Everything was just so lovely. And I said to myself one day, I would love to see women of color in these pictures or something a little different. And lo and behold, in looking for it, I found it. There is an African-American designer, her name escapes me at the moment, but she created a replica of that fabric, and she used African-American women in here and men to tell the story. And as you open up this fabric, you can see scenes of a child running and having fun with their horse. They're here having a picnic. The children are jumping rope. This here reminds me, it could even be a still for the story of Little Africa, which is another community in New York City, which I will be writing about or doing a piece on. But the fact that this was called home, she actually created this and called this textile by name. I said, this really does bring me to the point of where all our children should be. Until they are of age, they need to be kept close to home. So in this series, when I begin to shoot this, I will probably do 4 scenes where in each scene there will be a monster. And these are the monsters that I'm trying to depict to the parents and the people that are going to look at this, the audience, to say, okay. So if you think about it, usually the little girls, there are somebody in the neighborhood always watching. So we start with, I'll probably do a scene where she'll have flat shoes and she looks girly. Her accessories will be young. And then we'll do another scene where now she's maybe grown up and she's the next stage they target. And that's when you start to go out looking for jobs. Okay? We've heard of people like Weinstein now all of a sudden. Look what he's been doing for years to young women who wanted to get into acting. Okay? This is how they play. The monsters in the room are huge, but no one sometimes ever knows who they are. So we need to make our children aware. Be very, very careful with mind manipulations. Know what you know. Don't let people trick you. Trust your gut. If you're going out for a job interview, so this photo that I'm going to take, we're going to do it so that that's the story will show. And then the third scene I want to do with this dress is probably going to be something a little bit scarier, where the child may be in one of those tanks, those cargo tanks, because that's where they take our kids. They take them, shove them in there, and send them to another country. You never see them again. It's horrendous. So I'd like to do one there where she might be hovering, but all the while she will be wearing this around her eyes, because this dress will be entitled Not for Sale. So once the last shoot comes, that'll be when she's been empowered. This will be off her eyes at that last shoot. She will have boxing gloves on. She will be prepared to fight and protect herself in the same dress, meaning that you can be feminine.
Transition.
You can be pretty. You're grown up. You can do all of that. You can be all that woman you can be. But know that if someone is coming after you, you don't have to ask permission to fight back. Because we're always taught to be polite, to be nice, to be kind, to go tell somebody. And no, If someone is touching you improperly, know that you are within your rights to whatever you gotta do. Mm-hmm. So when you give your girls cute dresses with crinolines and all of that, make sure they know how to fight. It has to go hand in hand. I don't care if they're in boots and jeans. I don't care. It's not really about just the look. I'm only using this look to overemphasize, to make a point, and that you can be feminine, but you better be ready to kick butt, because it's kind of crazy out here. We have all kind of stories. We have stories, China, they don't want the girls. The Sudan, they are cutting our girls, right? You have this Pakistani, in Pakistan, they took a girl, shot her in the face because, what was the name of it?
Honor.
It's called an honor kill, because she didn't fall in love with the boy that they wanted her to marry. Instead, her father and brother shoots her in the face, puts her in a bag, and throws her in the river.
This is actually acceptable.
This is
all those
happening today. Okay, no, we can't have that. Even today, I saw a clip on Grace Jones. Here she's saying, #MeToo. However, I didn't allow it. She threw the thing in his face. She threw the glass in his face, a glass of champagne in his face, and left. She had the wherewithal then to say, I'm not doing that. So there shouldn't be 100 women coming out now, 10 years later, that someone molested you.
Surely
At that moment, you stop them from doing this to you at all costs. Money is not, come on. It's you have to live with this for the rest of your life. And there's no need for us to be afraid to say, you're not going to do that to me. And I don't have to ask anybody's permission. We've also had, I think, a video with some pageant ladies who, I believe they were from different Spanish or Latin American countries. I don't really remember, but it flipped by me on Facebook, and I said, each girl came up and she said, well, my measurements are, and instead of her giving me I'm hearing measurements, she was giving statistics of the abuse and of the abduction and how many women in her particular country were being molested and things like that. That I found really profound, that here you have a sexist kind of American pageant shows. I don't know. Are we really into that anymore? Yeah. Do you need to see me in a bikini to know how intelligent I am? I don't know. But
I don't think they're looking for the intelligence when you're in a bikini.
when we're in the bikini. But ironically, here these girls came out in a pageant about beauty, and they made a statement which I thought was just profound. And a good way to maybe use that platform. That, like I said, it doesn't have to be about crinolines and all of that. It can be about get your boots on and be ready to fight back. You can't allow people to push you around because you are of a certain gender. You just can't do it. So I'm hoping that we empower our girls to know, eat well, because then you're healthy. Get rest, because then you are alert. Stay close to home, travel with a friend. All of these things that your parents tell you, pay attention. They are abducting people off the street every day. And it all brings me back to that other room where the abolitionists, you see the photo where the sign says, caution. Okay, slave catchers, abductors. It's the same thing. And that was in the 1800s. They're still abducting. They're still hanging. They're still shooting.
Selling.
They're still selling us. But we're not for sale. And I hope that this dress, once I put it into production and we shoot it and we photograph it and we share it, and every year we, keep pushing it, and it helps to promote. Or remind a mother somewhere, or just bring it to the front of their forehead, the front of their heads. When you go to the supermarket, do not let your 4-year-old walk around. There is a video on Facebook showing a man in a supermarket who manipulates a little 4-year-old girl near a fruit stand. No one can see what he's doing. And within 3 minutes, he has molested the little girl, walking away smelling his fingers. He's doing this every day. And it could be your child. And she's in shock. She didn't know what happened to her. She walks away. Your child has been traumatized, and you don't even know it. Your 12 to 14-year-olds walking around the street with so-and-so watching their every move. Waiting for her to be 16. Watching her when she's 20. They take their time. You have to be careful about what's out here and protect our kids. That's what this piece is about.
And this is the whole thing, what you're doing. That's how amazing it is, because raising awareness, it doesn't matter how many times we talk about this subject.
You have to keep
If it is still there,
Yes.
exist, that's
Yes.
mean we need to do more
Be
work.
consistent on it.
Be consistent and just keep raising awareness.
Just
There
keep raising
is so many issues that we deal with every day, and like what you said with the human trafficking, human sex trafficking, abduction. It's the statistics are crazy.
And higher and higher. And it could be because of social media. It could be because we're now speaking about it. Doesn't matter why,
I think because
but we have
we
to
used
fight
to
it.
think about if you go outside and get abducted, no one is concerning about social media now. There is apps that creeps are contacting your
watching,
kids and
yes,
watching and
yes.
talking to them and making them feel comfortable, and then
Exactly.
getting to the point. So at the end, I think it's the parent responsibility
Yes.
to watch and to keep pushing
Yeah.
and keep educating
Yeah.
and raising awareness. And luckily, we have someone like you.
Aw, I'm trying. I think if we all work together with your show, I mean, we work with people that are in the education system. We're working with, there's so many things that are happening. So if we continue to make it more of a community thing, and I help you here, you help this one there. I can give a lesson today, or let's talk about this, or let's have a meeting at my house, whatever it is. There's this weird guy that's been hanging out on Elm Street lately. Has anyone noticed that? Like, we really just need to be
Get
more
back to
aware
community.
and get back to community. And I think everything is not about the dollar. I am not trying to be famous. I'm not trying to make a whole lot of clothes, make a whole lot of money. I'm trying to use my gifts to tell American horror stories. Some of these stories are horrible. How do we tell these kinds of stories in a palatable way that young children can understand? Albeit they may be a little shaken, they won't be traumatized by the way you present the information. There was 150 women hung decades in this country. That is an American horror story. I will figure out a way how to present it so that we can all get it and not feel dejected, but learn from it. This is another horror story. If they take your children, what would you do? You'd go crazy. Who could even imagine their child gone for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days? But this happens every day. So it's worth me. I don't mind doing this work. I love doing this work. I don't maybe love the topics. And I'm hoping that as we grow and maybe 10 years from now, we can be creating dresses for a whole lot more positive reasons. But in the meantime, I'll use the fabric to tell the stories that need to be told.
Use your resources. And that's what using your resources wisely. Well, with that note, what do you want everybody to know about the Bunn Fund and about Sara, and how can they reach you? Because I can see this being in the curriculums. I mean, there is a lot of untold stories, unsung story, like you said.
I think it takes time. I'm not at that level yet, but I think that if you just, I'm on Facebook.
And we will put a link to all of that at the end of the video.
I'm on, I have a We Wore More Than Shackles is a website. I'm really, really focused on trying to get the pieces into libraries for kids. If anybody knows of a town where maybe, their library on a Saturday would love to have, me bring the mannequins in the store and the clothing and give the children a story about Seneca or the Weeksville lady or whatever else I do. I mean, it's just a matter of working with community and getting the word out and just sharing what I'm doing. I will be opening up in July, hopefully, and people would be welcome to come and see the gallery, bring the kids, maybe learn how to sew, maybe pick up needle and thread or crochet needles, whatever we can do to just get community involved in realizing that the arts are the ticket to understanding our history. Everything is documented, and this is another piece that hopefully will go down in history as well.
Well, with that note, we are very thankful for you having us in your home and allowing us to go back in history with you. And we'll definitely keep in touch and follow you as you progress. And I'm sure you're going to get somewhere.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. And please, we will put the link of all Sarah's information. And if you need to learn more and to raise awareness about all the subject or the topic that we discuss, get in touch with Sarah or get in touch with us, and we will get you in touch with Sarah. And the key point here is educating and keep pushing and raising awareness. Otherwise, we are not going to solve any issues. Well, until next time, good night.
Thank you.
It's not a night, but